Good morning. We're on page 15.
That's what I'm like.
15. Okay, we're looking at chapter 4 today. And we'll see. It's a little bit of a longer chapter. We'll see how much we can cover. So, just to bring us up to speed as to where we are and important context for this chapter. So, as I mentioned, chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5 discusses the godly soul's reality. Chapter 1 introduced the notion of two souls, the fact that there are two sets of consciousness, there are two versions of self, as we spoke about at the time. So chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5 discusses the godly soul's reality. And then 6, 7, 8 is going to describe the animal soul, the natural soul, the human soul's reality. So zeroing in on the godly soul's reality, chapter 2 describes the godly soul's essence, its spiritual DNA, being part of Hashem. From Hashem himself, we explain the analogy and how the neshama comes from that pure, perfect place, one with Hashem, and it descends to the world till it comes into a body. And in that descent is where you might get distinction between one soul and another, but in its core and root, it's one. That's chapter 2. And then chapter 3 describes the godly soul's personality. And the godly soul's personality, imagining it without any obstruction of the animal soul, because when we experience our godly soul, we experience it through the prism and obstruction of the animal soul's self-interests, which we'll deal with later when we get to the interface between the godly and animal soul. But imagining the godly soul in its pristine, perfect, pure state, if it's operating on its own, we describe in chapter 3 its personality. And primarily, it's made up of a mind and a heart, all focused on God himself, because it is a godly entity, and therefore it's going to be about God himself. And we went into the details of that. And very briefly, the mind begins with a concept of its connection with Hashem, Chokhmah, then elaborates in understanding it, Bina, and then Das, getting to know it on a personal level, intimately knowing it, and then that intimate knowledge gives birth to feelings toward Hashem, love, I want to get closer, and fear, retreat, inward, I don't want to mess this up, on one leg. Now it's important to understand this because in later chapters, when we discuss the struggle between the godly and the animal soul, it's important to know the godly soul's tools, how its mind works, and how its heart works, and what stimulates it, and how to use the tools that it has. So we're going to come back to that. Now, chapter 4 and 5 is going to discuss the godly soul's world outside of its own experience, how it interacts with the world outside, essentially. Now, because we're talking about the way the soul interacts with the world outside, he's going to call this part of the soul levushim. That's the terminology he uses in Hebrew. In English, that means clothing. Okay? So much like physical clothing is the way in which a person interfaces with the world outside. Right? I get dressed and then I present myself to the world. And depending on how I'm interacting with the world, that's the kind of clothing I wear. From a doctor, from a rabbi, if I'm going to the gym, or if I'm lounging at home. Right? There's different clothing you have for different things. And that signals to those around you, and to yourself even, how you're interacting with the world outside. Right? So first of all, it's an interface with the world outside, and B, it can be switched. It's not me. It can be easily switched. As opposed to my body, which is, I can make it healthier or less healthy, but that takes a lot of time and a lot of work. So your body does change, but it takes a lot more work to change the body. The clothing, however, I can change in a minute. And the same thing is true of the spiritual body and clothing of the soul. The body of the soul, that's the mind and heart. As we described in chapter 3. Throughout the chapter, throughout the Tanya, he's going to refer to that as Mahus HaNefesh, the very soul itself. Who he is. There's a mind and a heart. It could be changed. The way I understand the world, the way I feel about the world, the way I feel about myself, could be changed. That takes a lot of time and a lot of work. Just like changing the physical body would take a lot of time and a lot of work. But the soul's clothing, the way it interfaces with the world, that's easily changed in a minute. Okay. So what are the clothing? That, as he's going to tell us in a minute, is thought, speech, and action. Okay, speech and action is easier to see how it's clothing. There's actions in the world outside. I can act or not act. And certainly acting is the way I interface with the world. I can stop doing certain activities, start doing certain activities. like clothing, that changes, or I can not do anything at all. Same thing with speech. The way I talk, what I say, how I say it, to who I say it, that can be changed, that can be stopped and started at any moment, like clothing. Thoughts are harder to imagine them as clothing, but only on one account. On the account that my thoughts are constantly running. I can't turn it off. But in every other regard, it's the same thing as clothing. I can change what I'm thinking about whenever I want. I could even think about things that I disagree with. I could think about things I dislike. So it's not as if my thinking is only about who I am. Right? Who I am, the way I understand the world, that's me. The way I feel about the world, that's me. The way I feel about myself, or the way I understand myself, that's me. Changing that takes a lot of time. But the thinking, I can decide in a minute to think about something else. That's contrary to what I believe, actually. Right? So the only thing that makes thought less like clothing than like the other two is the fact that I can't turn it off. But in every other regard, it's the same. I can switch it, and it doesn't represent me necessarily. So, whereas the other two garments, the other two clothing, speech and action, is the way I interface with the world outside, my thoughts are the way I interface with myself. But it's still an interface. It's not the self. It's the way I interface with myself. But it isn't the self. The self is my feelings and my understanding. And then I interface with myself through my thoughts. This is a very, very important piece of information to understand. As we're going to learn, it's going to be a major tool in understanding that my thoughts are not me. It's the way I interface with me that's going to become a very important part in how I can control myself, change myself by using that interface with myself called my thoughts. But first of all, it starts with understanding that I'm not my thoughts. My thoughts are a tool I use. And it's a tool I can't turn off, that's true, but it's still a tool that I'm in control of and a tool that I use. Okay, so more on that later. Okay, so that's what we need to know as background before we get into this chapter. I guess one more final thing, which I guess will come clear, is that because we're talking about the godly soul's thought, speech, and action are obviously going to be about Torah and mitzvahs. Okay, it's about interfacing with God, so it's going to be about God. Okay, so that's where we are now in chapter 4. The first half of chapter 4. The second half, we'll see if we get there. We'll introduce that when we get there. So let's begin then on the top of page 15. Perek Dalet, chapter 4. V'oid. In addition to the godly soul's personality, the godly soul's own makeup of its mind and heart, there is l'chol nefesh elakish, to every godly soul, it also possesses shloisha levushim, 3 garments. Shehem, which they are: 1, machshava, thought; 2, dibur, speech; 3, umaisa, and action. And because this is the godly soul, therefore the thought, speech, and action are going to be shel taryag mitzvah Torah, concerning the 613 mitzvahs of Torah. And he spells out sheker sha'od makayim b'maisa, when a person performs an action called mitzvahs maisius, any performative mitzvahs, ubedibur, and with his speech, who oisik bepirush kol taryag mitzvahs v'hilchos, he engages in explaining the 613 mitzvahs and their laws. Uv'machshava, and in his thoughts, hu masik kol ma she'efsher lo lahasig bepardes haTorah, he thinks or comprehends, using his thought, all that he can possibly comprehend in the garden of Torah. So you see the word garden, pardes, right? It has like that those 2 lines in it. What are they called? Quotation marks. They indicate that.
An annotation on top of number 4. Is that what?
No, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th line, the second word, bit taryag. Sorry, 5th line, 6th line, which is bit pardes. So you have the same thing in the word taryag. Now that's just because it's a number. It's not a word. 613, taryag is a word. But in pardes, which means garden, those 2 lines there, like that quotation thing, indicates that the letters all represent a word themselves. It's an acronym. Pardes, which is this word for garden, stands for pshat, remez, drush, sod, which translates as plain meaning, allusions, expositions, I think that's the right word of saying it, and mystical. That's just 4 dimensions of how any passage in Torah can be understood. On its most plain meaning, there are things that the text hints to that aren't directly in the plain meaning. There are things you can extrapolate from the text, and then there's the mystical level. Okay, so he's adding that the thought is not just about, it's about any or all areas of Torah. Okay, so now what happens? When the person is engaged, the godly soul is fully active. He has no obstruction because we haven't yet met the animal soul and its desires in its world. So the godly soul is the only thing operating here in this imaginary, I don't want to be facetious, but this unicorn, where it's just the godly soul of a being with no other obstruction. So his entire mind and heart is engaged completely, fully, thought, speech, and action all day long in just performing God's Torah and speaking of God's Torah and trying to understand whatever he can of God's Torah and mitzvahs. Then, Hare Klolus Taryag Evari Nafshoi, the totality of the 613 limbs of his soul. What does that mean? So just briefly, in Kabbalah, specifically in the Kabbalah of the Arizal, they understand the world, the body, and the soul as all stacked on, and Torah as all stacked upon each other. So the body itself is made up of 613 parts. Okay, 613 parts, not getting into what they are. Halacha discusses that a little bit, but there's 630 parts to the body. And then stacked into that is 613 parts of the soul. The soul is embedded in the body to give it life. So there's 613 parts of the body. So in that is embedded 613 parts of the soul, which are, commensurate, not commensurate, makbil. They are parallel, thank you, to 613 mitzvahs, which are parallel to 613 investments from Hashem into this world. And therefore, in this perfect world, the person's engaged with all 613 parts of his body. That engage all 613 parts of his soul. In all 613 mitzvahs, that elevates all 613 parts of the world and connects it to Hashem. This is like the Kabbalistic description of what you're doing when you're doing Torah and mitzvahs. Okay?
I have a very simple question.
Yeah?
How is it that, so we have our 613 parts of our body, which obviously correlates to the 613 parts that Hashem puts in us, but however, each person within our limited physical self cannot do the 613 mitzvahs.
Oh, fantastic. I was hoping you would ask that question. How do we do all 613 mitzvahs? Considering that some of them don't even apply to us.
Exactly.
Right? Some apply to Kohen, some apply to Levi, some apply to men, some apply to women, some apply to... Right? There's all kinds of things. Right? Another thing I like to make the point even more, there are some mitzvahs you hope you never do. For example, the mitzvah to return a stolen object. I hope you're never doing that mitzvah, because hopefully you never stole from anybody. Right? It's a mitzvah to return a stolen object. You hope to never do them. So it makes it even more difficult. Very good question. So I was hoping someone would ask that. So if you look at the language precisely, okay, let's go back, let's go to the 4th line, where it describes speech. Okay, so if you were asked to describe thought, speech, and action of the godly soul, okay, action's easy, doing mitzvahs, what would you say of speech? Okay, thoughts, also easy, thoughts of Torah, which you said. What would you say of speech? Tefillah, brachas, and Torah. But listen to what he writes. But Dibra in his speech, who Isaac he's engaged with, the pirush in the explanations, kol Taryag mitzvahs v'hilchasein. All 613 mitzvahs and its halachot. Why say that? Just say in speech he's involved in Torah. For whatever reason he's missing prayer. But why describe Torah as he's involved in the explanation of all 613 mitzvahs? How would you do that? Just say Torah. Because in your learning of Torah and your speech, you actually could be engaged in all 613 mitzvahs by learning about all 613 mitzvahs. Fellas, so that's something you actually can do. Anybody can do. So interestingly enough, later in the back of Tanya, since you brought this up, in the back of Tanya in part 4, he describes how because each soul has to do 613 mitzvahs, each soul has to go through like reincarnations to make sure it makes up with all the 613 mitzvahs. Right? But here, he doesn't say that. Here he says, you can talk about all 613 mitzvahs, and then when you do that, you're engaged in all 613 mitzvahs, so all 613 parts of your body and all 613 parts of your soul are connected to all 613 mitzvahs. Now, this is what he says here in Tanya. Now, the cool part is that it's only once our Rebbe comes along and introduces this idea of everybody learning the book of Rambam do we actually have a program to learn about all 613 mitzvahs.
Before that, 613 was just his after
Well, they exist in halacha, and anybody could have learned Rambam. Rambam was written 1,000 years ago.
Pulled out all 613.
He's the only one to encase into one book.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would be scattered throughout Talmud, Mishnah, Sifra, Sifri would be scattered all over the place. You could do all 613 mitzvahs without Rambam, but it would be very difficult, though, because it's scattered. Rambam collates them into one neat book. So, interestingly enough, with the Rebbe's introduction of Rambam, everybody can do it. I'm going to add even more. This is, again, my own little theories here. So I mentioned that in section 4, he describes how every soul has to go through all 613 mitzvahs, and therefore has to go through reincarnation. He describes that as a condition for Mashiach coming. A condition for Mashiach coming is that the totality of souls are also divided into 613. So all 613 totality of Jewish souls have to be engaged in all 613 mitzvahs.
More diluted versions of the
Diluted versions, yeah.
613
Or not diluted is not the right word, but pared down. Or extractions. So there's all kinds of ways it breaks down. It's 1 to 7 to 10 to 613 to 600,000 to millions and trillions. So he describes how all souls have to go through all 613 mitzvahs in order for Mashiach to come. Now, the Rebbe didn't explain why, but he did say that his introducing this notion of studying Rambam as a preparation for Mashiach coming. Didn't explain how or why. This is my little theory. Because that's a way for all souls to be engaged in all 613 mitzvahs. Since you asked. Okay.
So interesting. I never thought of it like that. I never
Yeah, there you have it. And it's precisely in these words. Because in speech he could have just said, finished. Doesn't say that. Which the only one book that does that is Rambam's Book of Law.
So maybe women should also start.
Sefer Mitzvahs.
Sure. Sefer Mitzvahs is the common way to go. But just by the way, I'm throwing it out there. Actually, at least on one occasion, mentioned women learning Rambam. Period. Actually, yeah, like full on, yeah. He did not rule it out. Let's not put it that way. I'm not saying she start. You have your life going on, but I'm just saying you don't have to limit it.
I need sleep.
Yeah, you're also raising children. Yeah. Okay.
One day.
So where are we? Okay, so Hare, then if the person's engaged in thought, speech, and action of Torah and mitzvahs, Hare klolis taryag evore nafshe, then the totality of the 613 parts of his soul, the lobashim are enclosed, are engaged in taryag mitzvah Torah, the 613 mitzvahs of Torah. Right? Not in the study of Torah, in the 613 mitzvahs of Torah. Okay, now specifically. Now, I want to stop here for a second and spent a minute talking about the word enclosed, right? I think we once spoke about it when we learned chapter 1. We talked about the soul being enclosed in the body. So I want to add a few words about this word enclosed just to explain the next few lines. So he just said that when the person engages in his thought, speech, and action are engaged in Torah, so he's using the garments of his soul to be engaged in Torah and mitzvahs, then the totality of his soul is enclosed in Torah and mitzvahs. So just to explain what that word enclosed means. Enclosed, if you want to visualize it, it's kind of like a babushka, right? Where you open up one and you see another one, you open another one, open another one. It's like layers and layers and layers of one experience, right? That's what enclosed means. It means where one entity or one function is active through another. Okay? So my ideas are enclosed in the words that I'm now communicating. It's enclosed. Right? So there's two components here. There's the ideas and there's the words, and one is enclosed in the other to share it with you. Right? An example I like to give is if you took a parent giving their child a kiss on the cheek. So there is the most mechanical part of it. Just physically, there's lips going on a cheek and the movements that are required to do that on a very, very mechanical level. But nobody thinks about it that way. Because enclosed in that action is a feeling. Right? The parent is expressing love to their child. Right? So nobody thinks about it in unless you're a doctor, no one thinks about the muscles moving and the physical actions of that. Because we look at it and we see that enclosed in it is a much more important thing, which is the love the parent is expressing. So sorry?
The intention?
The intention, the feeling, right? It's a feeling being expressed. So anybody looking at that, even though they're seeing the physical thing, that's not what they're seeing in their mind's eye. they're seeing what's enclosed in the action, which is the feeling. The parent is expressing a feeling of love. We can go a step deeper. Now, what triggered the parent to express that love? Okay, the kid did something cute. Yeah. Okay, so enclosed in the feeling of love is the awareness of my child's clever antic. Now, when my neighbor's child does a clever antic, I'm not doing the same thing. So why is it when my child is doing a clever antic, does it trigger the feeling of love that results in an action of giving my child a kiss on the cheek? Because inherently, me and my child are attached. So the essential bond between parent and child is enclosed in the awareness of my child's cuteness, which is enclosed in the love I have for my child, which is enclosed in the action of giving my child a kiss on the cheek. Anybody watching it knows all those levels in a second. Even though what they saw physically was just the physical action, but we all intuitively understand, because we have a mind's eye, to think of what's enclosed in that action. Going down to parent and child are inherently connected. And therefore, automatically, when there's a cute thing, there's going to be a feeling of love, which is going to land itself in a physical action. Right? That's what enclosed means. And the same thing is true of the godly soul doing a mitzvah. Right? There's a physical mitzvah. It's an action. But in that action is a thought, a feeling, which goes back to the essential connection that the soul has with Hashem. Right? So that's what he's about to describe now. So I'm engaged in the action, but there's something inside of me that's engaged in that body that's engaged in the action. So in the thought or in the words of Torah are embedded some feeling I have. And embedded in that feeling is a connection I have. So chapter 1, chapter 2, and 3, the essential bond I have with God. And then my personality, the godly soul's personality, understanding, and feeling is enclosed in chapter 4, the actions of Torah and mitzvahs. Another reason why it's called clothing. Because it's in there that I invest my feelings for Hashem. My understanding for Hashem is going to be enclosed in the actions I do for Hashem. Just like my feelings for my child is enclosed in the hug I give him, which is a physical activity. Okay, clear? So let's see how he says it inside. We brought this more specifically. Let's break down the levels of what's invested and clothed in what. Pchinas Chabad shebenafshay, the intellectual part of his soul. Chabad standing for Chochmah Bina Dat, the 3 levels of the intellect that we spoke about in chapter 3. Mulubeshes, they are enclosed b'hasagas HaTorah, in my comprehension of Torah. So when I'm comprehending Torah, I might be thinking about what the law is when an ox bumps into a cow and the cow breaks its leg. Right? So that's what I'm thinking about. But invested in that is my godly soul's mind yearning to understand and know God. One enclosed in the next. Right? So the godly soul's intellect is enclosed in its understanding of Torah, Shuhu Masik, whatever he understands, the Pardes in the garden of Torah, to whatever capacity his soul he is capable of understanding, and the root of his soul above, which grants him whatever level of capacity, and not just whatever level of capacity, also the type of capacity. This person's more attracted to mystical, this person's more attracted to the halachic, this person's to the midrashic and whatnot. Based on their godly soul's personality type, they're going to invest their godly soul's understanding of God in their learning of Torah on whatever level and whatever element of Torah it is. Midas, and then the godly soul's feelings toward God, Shehem, which they are. We already explained in chapter 3 that the godly soul's feelings are broken down into 2 categories. Yira, fear, to retreat. I don't want to mess this up, so I'm going to hold myself back. Va'ava, and love. I want to express myself, so I'm going to do something. Ve'anfein v'toldesein. And then the offshoots of these 2 experiences, retreat or expression, and the children of these 2 experiences. So different types of love and fear that will be explored later. But all feelings, as you spoke about in chapter 3, are divided into 1 or 2 categories or a combination. I'm either retreating inward, holding back, or I'm expressing love, fear. Okay? So these feelings that the soul has toward God, malubeshes, are going to be enclosed the kiyam mitzvahs, in the performance of mitzvahs, the ma'isa v'dibur, whether in action or in speech, which speech is shehu Talmud Torah, which is the study of Torah, shekeneged kulan, which our Mishnah says the study of Torah is comparable to all mitzvahs. Okay, so the godly soul's mind enclosed in its understanding of Torah, and the godly soul's feelings enclosed in its behavior of Torah and mitzvah specifically. So I'm learning, and now I'm saying words of Torah right now. I'm reading Tanya, so I'm saying words of Torah. So hopefully invested in that is my feelings that I want to connect to Hashem. Right? Just like I'm talking to my son and telling my son about, I don't know how life works, or I'm just teaching him how to ride a bike, it doesn't matter. Invested in that is my feelings toward my son. Right? So invested in the actions I'm doing toward Hashem, and clothed in that is my feeling for Hashem. Now specifically, 2 types of feelings: fear, retreat, hold back; love, express, do. And that is going to be explained presently. You with me? Clear?
Yeah.
Key 4. Ha'ava, love. This line that I'm about to read is going to become like revisited throughout Tanya. Ha'ava, the love, he shorish kol reish memches mitzvahs asay, is the root of all 248 positive commandments. The root of any action I do for God, it's a positive commandment, thou shalt do. The root of that's going to be the love I have for Hashem, the attraction I feel for Hashem. Umimena, and from it, from that love, heinim shachos, are where these actions flow from. Right? Ubilada, and without that love, ein lahem kiyum amiti. They don't have any true durability. Okay. Now you might be thinking, what do you mean? I could do the mitzvah just because I'm told. I don't feel anything.
Exactly.
Sorry?
That's exactly
Right, it
what
could
I'm
be that
saying.
way.
You have people who are not on the same path, not on the same trajectory, and they just do it because
They're doing it. No love, no feeling.
They don't understand.
Very good. A few things to be said about that. So number one, a person could do just because whatever. Number one, that's going to be discussed later in chapter 41. We're going to discuss that in more detail. And here, again, we're describing the godly soul in its perfect state without any obstruction. So hypothetically, this person who is a godly soul without any obstructions from the animal soul, then naturally from his love is going to flow of actions. That's number one. Number two, if the person is doing mitzvah because out of fear, let's say, then really he's not even doing a mitzvah. Not in the sense, of course he's doing a mitzvah. But what he's doing is, he's ensuring he's not failing to do the mitzvah. So his assays become lot taseh. His do's become don't do. Which is like, don't miss a day of whatever it is. Right? If I'm engaged in something positively, it's only going to come out of a feeling of desire for it, or attraction for it, or want for it. If I'm doing it because I'm afraid of losing something, then I'm not doing it in a positive sense. I'm doing it in a negative sense, in that I don't want to miss it. So like I have reduced my positive commandments to negative commandments. Instead of, I'm doing tefillin today, it's, I'm making sure I'm not missing tefillin today.
But
It's almost, even though technically I'm doing the same action, but it lacks the positive nature of it. And if it's truly a positive nature, it's going to be out of love, out of attraction, desire for it. Follow that? Not so much?
I do, but you're
Yeah.
also assuming that the person is thinking about not missing out on the mitzvah, whereas I'm talking about someone who's mechanical, who's doing it because this is what we're taught, that, but we've never reflected, we just do.
Right, so even someone who says, okay, we'll get to chapter 41, but even someone who says, I'm doing it because this is what it always does, he's basically saying what I just said. I don't want to miss it. This is how I know life, I don't want to miss it. It's a kind of fear. Fear, not in the sense of trembling, but fear in the sense of like, this is my security, this is what I know, this is what I'm doing, I don't want to miss out on it. So even his doing is a negative, it's not a positive. It's not truly a positive mitzvah. It's a negative mitzvah that happens to be a to-do list. Because I don't want to miss out, or I don't want to fail, or I don't want to step out of what I know. Whatever the fears are that prevents me from not missing it. Right?
And then?
Sorry?
So
it's not a real mitzvah taseh. It's not a true mitzvah taseh. Which is why he says,
the negative mitzvah.
Ubalada en lokim amiti. He doesn't have any true durability. It has durability, but it isn't true. It's not true, because a true positive action flows from, I want this. Otherwise, it's not a true positive act. Let me put it this way. If I discovered that I'll be just fine by not doing it, do I do it or not? If I'm doing it out of love, I still do it. I want it. If I'm doing it out of fear and I find out that I'm going to be just fine without it, I'm not doing it. Because I'll be just fine without it. Following? So it's not a durable action. It's an action that prevents a lack.
So I understand that it comes from the soul. I have this crazy idea in my head. I keep thinking of a Marana woman in South America who decided to light candles on Shabbat, by the way. And she doesn't do it on a specific time, but she just does it because her ancestors did it that way every Friday night. She has a Jewish soul because she's Jewish, coming down from all Jewish mothers. And I'm trying to equate how.
Okay,
Like it's mechanical.
I'm gonna have to. No.
Soul. It's like it's
put
not.
the example aside. It's not.
Okay.
Understand what it's saying. We'll
I
figure that out
understand
later.
what it's saying, but it doesn't
Because we
apply.
will come to that. We'll get to that in chapter 18, for example. What I'm saying is, understand what it's saying here,
Okay.
right? And what he's saying here is that these are the words: "Ubalada, without love, ein lokim amiti." It doesn't have any true durability. Because without love, without desire for it positively, I'm only doing it so long as it's not going to fall away. But as long as I can get away with not doing it, I won't do it.
I don't want
Right?
to.
Because I don't want.
Oh, like think of like
Yeah, like it's a kid
Kids,
putting
like
on
with-
film.
Sorry?
like when
Kid-
your
a kid
kids
putting
doing
on
things.
film. Yeah.
Oh, if the kids don't know
Or
what
like
the
making their bed, or so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make my bed because
Yeah,
my
yeah.
mother wants to. And so
I just
well, I'm
there's a
like-
level
So
of
if today,
soul in there that
right, so
we
if
haven't-
today I know my mom's not going to catch me, I won't do it.
Right.
I mean, nothing will happen because I'm not. It's not a positive action. It's a negative action. I don't want to not do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Okay.
You just have
And
to
therefore,
stop there.
sorry.
I said I just have to stop it there and not think of anything.
No. So as long as you understand what it's saying here, question is okay. As long as you understand what is being said. Okay. We balada, and without it, without love, ein lokim amiti. It doesn't have any true durability because I don't have any attraction for it per se. And he further elaborates. Key because habakaiman be'emes, one who does it truthfully, hoa oives Hashem, one who does it truthfully. You can do it falsely, but the one who's doing truthfully is because the one who loves Hashem, v'chafetz the dafka boy, and wants to connect to Hashem be'emes truthfully, and efsher ladafka boy be'emes, and I have no capacity to truly connect to him, ki'im b'ki'im ramach pekudin, apart for doing the 248 instructions of Hashem. I don't have any other way to connect to him. So, in other words, like this: if we're looking from the neshama outward, starting from the neshama's existence and moving outward towards its behavior and its interaction with the world, you start off with chapter 2. It's a piece of God Himself. It's plunked into a body. This piece of Hashem has understandings about Hashem and has feelings about Hashem, and it's just dying to reconnect to Hashem, which is what He truly is. So he looks around and says, "How do I do this? All right, here's activities that connect me to Hashem. I'm all in." That's the true performance of a mitzvah, from the perspective of the neshama going outward. Okay? Second half of the chapter is going to talk about the value of the mitzvah in and of itself, detached from the feelings the neshama has. But if we're starting from the neshama and we're looking outward, like from the neshama's starting from the vantage point of the godly soul itself, it looks at this and says, here's opportunities to express my feelings for Hashem, I'm all in. Right? And that would be true performance from its perspective. Without that feeling, it's not a true performance. It's rote. I'm trying to get away with it. It's a checklist. I'm making sure I don't fail. Whatever the reasons are, but it doesn't have that true depth of what the action is supposed to be, which is an overflow of my desire to connect to Hashem expressed in an action. Okay. Now he adds, and this is going to be addressed in the second half of the chapter, so I'm only going to say it now briefly because we're going to revisit it, which is Shehem, these 248 instructions, Ramach, they are 248, Evarin, limbs, Demalka of the king, Kiviyachal, so to speak. As explained elsewhere. This is going to be elaborated again in the second half of the chapter. We'll elaborate on this more. But very briefly, he's quoting from, I think it's this. He's quoting from the Zohar. I thought so. He's quoting from the Zohar. And the Zohar says that the 248 mitzvahs are the 248, quote, limbs of God. God has limbs? What does that mean? So we're going to explain further, but in a basic level it means something like this. In the same way, if you grab somebody else's arm and you pull them, you don't just pull their arm. You pull them, including their nefesh. So even their soul, their conscience, which is not physical, is dragged along with the physical body. And that's again because the conscious is enclosed in the body, and therefore you pull the body, you're pulling the person's conscious also. It's not as if the conscience left behind in the other room. So just as a physical body can draw upon the person's spiritual being, his conscience, so too the physical action of mitzvah can draw upon Hashem's spiritual truth, his God himself. And thus the mitzvahs are likened to the limbs of Hashem. So if I want to express my love to Hashem, I want to grab onto him, so do a mitzvah. You're grabbing onto Hashem. Okay, this is going to be elaborated on in the second half of the chapter. So that's as far as love, right? So we broke down what's enclosed in what. The godly soul's mind, enclosed in the understanding of Torah. The godly soul's love, enclosed and expressed an overflowing desire to connect to Hashem through the only way possible, which is performing Hashem's mitzvahs, which are these limbs of Hashem, these ways of connecting to Hashem's truth. Vayira, and fear, awe of God, he shorish, this is the root, l'shin samachei lotase, to the 365 don't do's. Why is that? Ki yarei limrod b'melech malchei amlach makadosh baruch hu. Because he has an inherent awe and fear of transgressing the king's command. The Holy One, blessed be he. Now I just want to explain for a minute. This is not the fear of punishment. The fear of punishment is not a fear of God at all, actually. The fear of punishment is a fear of myself pain. Getting back to the point made earlier. If I discover that I can get away with doing this and not get punished because God gave a 2-for-1 card or something, then I'll do the sin. If the only thing preventing me is the fear of punishment, because I already have a get out of jail free card, what do I care? Right? Because if the whole motivation is the fear of punishment, if I can get away without it, I'll get away without it. Because the king said he's looking the other way today. Let's just say, even though I know the king dislikes it. But he's not going to punish me. Right? Children do this. Sorry?
Or you think he's not punished.
So now the fact is Hashem is going to punish us, right? So, but I'm just making the point that if it's just about punishment, it isn't really truly a fear of God. It's a fear of the pain I'm going to get. Right? Like, children do this. If we frame our entire relationship with our children around reward and punishments, then their entire relationship to us is going to be around reward and punishment. And if they can get away with, manipulating Tati with a cute smile, then they'll make trouble, give a cute smile, and then make trouble again, because they figured out how to game the system.
There's also a
Right?
calculation.
It becomes a calculation. Is it worth it? Or maybe is it worth it? Maybe this is going to be fun enough
Right,
that it's worth it,
worth it,
and the
yeah.
punishment can be reduced. I know I can negotiate later. But that's,
My kid thinks that way.
sorry?
I don't think that a kid thinks that way. I think
Depends how you frame the relationship.
No, I
If
definitely know.
if parents or teachers, you see this in classrooms also,
And teachers, yeah.
if teachers,
Yeah.
if they frame the relationship as reward and punishment, then that's how the kids are going to engage back. Right? And their parents do this also.
Homework. They didn't really do their homework. They copied it from their friends. 'Cause
I'm not giving parenting advice
I'm
now,
just saying it's about
but
the soul
Right.
part, like with the soul, always, each child always wants to please their parents. So that's where I'm coming from.
so then it's not fear of punishment, it's reverence for my parent himself. That's exactly my point. If it's only about fear of punishment, then I'm going to try to scam my way out. And unfortunately, there are educators and parents who frame their entire relationships that way. And that's what happens. Or the relationship is about, I'm your parent, you're the child. This is the way life is. Then there's an inherent respect for what my parents instruct. Not that they're going to be perfect. But when they are listening, it's not because of the fear of consequence. It's because mommy asked. Right? And I don't want to do what mommy said not to do. Period. Not because they're perfect. But when they are listening, that's the reason. And that's the kind of reverence he's talking about here. There's an inherent fear of doing, failing Hashem's command. That's it. And therefore he said, don't touch that, I'm not touching it. He said, don't do this on Shabbos, I'm not doing it. Right? That's level 1 of fear. This is going to be broken down into its more detailed levels in chapter 41.
So why does he call it fear? Why doesn't he just call it reverence?
The Hebrew word is yira. How do you translate yira? So translate it as reverence. And it's probably more correct, because fear in Hebrew is probably pachad.
Yeah, it's like
Pachad is fear. Yira is much more reverence or even awe. Even respect. Yeah. Okay. Or yira primis mizu. There's an even deeper fear. Deeper reverence. Not a reverence of, I don't want to fail. It's deeper than that. Shem is boishish migudulasai. He is, quote, ashamed in the presence of God's grandeur. Lamreis einek vaidai, to rebel in the honor of the king's eye. Velasas Rabbeinav, and to do that which is wrong, bad in his eyes. Kol Tovas Hashem, anything that God despises, Hasher Soneh, which God hates, quote, so to speak. Hema Klippas Sitra Achra, which they are the Klippa and the Sitra Achra, the other side. So, just to explain briefly what this is, and what's the difference between this and the previous level, again, to be elaborated much more in chapter 41 and 42 and 43. But essentially, it's as follows. There's one level of reverence, which is, I don't want to misbehave. Then there's a much deeper level of reverence, which is not just that I don't want to misbehave. There's a level of reverence in which being in this person's presence puts me in a position where I just don't want to do anything really. For example, I've given this example before. You have, I'm not sure if I shared it at this table, but you have a person who works for the king, and the person's job is to be the stable boy. Right? And because he has proper reverence and awe for the king is a loving king. The king's not going to smite him down, but he's got reverence and awe for the king, so he does his job very faithfully. Right? How often does he see the king? Only when the king comes to get a horse. And even then, well, let's actually do it that way. That's even better. So on a daily basis, he's making sure not to fail the king because he has reverence for the king's grandeur and whatever. Okay. Then the king comes to the stable to get a horse. Where does he go? Surprise. King showed up. What does he do? So if he's ready for the king, before the king comes, he cleans up. He makes sure his boots aren't muddy anymore. And he stands there at attention, waiting for the king to come and he'll help the king get on to mount his horse, whatever that is. If the king shows up by surprise and he's caught with his overalls and his boots are muddy, not just muddy, it's full of horse dung, he goes running in a corner. What are you afraid of? You're doing everything the king asked you. You're doing the king's job. You didn't fail the king in any way. What are you doing? Why are you running into a corner? Because there's an inherent shame in being sullied in the presence of such beauty and perfection. It's a much deeper reverence than I don't want to do the wrong thing. It's a reverence for the king himself on a deeper level, for who his grandeur is. Just the very notion of God's grandeur and the very notion of being in God's presence itself makes me retreat to such a degree that failing the king is not even in the question. And if the king doesn't like it, I'm not even going anywhere near that thing. Right? Not just, I want to follow the king's instruction because I respect the king. That's the stable boy when the king isn't there. He doesn't see the king. He wants to respect the king because the king gave him an instruction. He's gonna saddle the horse exactly where the king wants him to. But when the king shows up and he's not prepared, even if he is prepared, he stands with the king says two words to him. He can't, out of breath, doesn't even know what to say with himself because the king spoke to him. Right? I think I said the story. It's a great story. I don't know if it ever happened. Probably never did. But this is a story that they tell of the Tsar traveling throughout Russia, and as is the law and halacha, that when a king comes to town, it's your obligation to go and see the king. It's halacha. So there's an older chassid living in some town. The Tsar is coming, so like everybody else, he goes out to greet the Tsar. Great. But whatever, he's a chassid, he's involved in Torah and godliness. He's not super impressed by this whole Tsar business. And I guess his facial features gave that off. He's standing there, but... Okay. One day, a few days later, knock on the door. Tsar's messenger is here. The Tsar wants to see you. Me? Sure. Yep. This is your address. This is your name. The Tsar wants to see you. Of course, he starts freaking out. And from his town till he gets to, St. Petersburg, and to get to the king's palace takes him weeks and months of travel. And every time he's going there, he's thinking, what could I have possibly done that would make the Tsar want to see me? And he's going through every single moment of his life, and he's trying to think, what did he possibly do that would cause the Tsar to want to see him? And he's getting more scared and more scared and more scared. And finally he walks into the throne room and he's trembling. And the Tsar says, that's what I wanted. Go home. Right? Because he didn't have that... That's Yiras Baishas. That's a fear that comes out of almost a shame. Like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. This is so big and grand for me. I don't belong here even. It's a much deeper fear than just, I don't want to mess up. Okay? Now, when this is the fear, it's not just, I don't want to do what the king doesn't like. But it's anything that the king doesn't, it's not just I don't want to transgress the king's command. It's more than that. Anything that in the slightest way the king doesn't like, I'm away from. So this kind of person is not just staying away from sin. He's thinking 3 times before he eats anything because, does Hashem really want me to eat all that? And if I'm not eating with the right intention, this is like a misappropriation of Hashem's world. That's how he's thinking about it. As opposed to Hashem said to eat kosher, I'm eating kosher. Hashem said, made him make a bracha, I'm making a bracha, that's fine. That's the first level of fear. I'm not transgressing the king. The deeper level of fear is, this is Hashem's food in Hashem's world, am I eating this right? And if there's any vestige of selfishness, this is called klipa, I don't want to do with this. I don't have anything to do with that. It's a much deeper fear and reverence. Okay, which is, we're going to learn in chapter 43, is a very, very lofty level that not necessarily she would be expecting to live by on a regular day. Certainly. Okay.
I find that all that you're talking about here really has to do with very high level tzaddikim.
That's why I said at the beginning, this is the godly soul without any obstruction from the animal soul, right? So, but it's important to know this because when we get to the way the godly soul interacts with the animal soul, we're going to harken back to these tools. But these are the godly soul's tools that exist. If it was never obstructed with the animal soul, here's how it would experience.
Could you say
Right?
that
But we have an obstruction, which we have to deal with, yeah?
in order to really fully, I'm going to use a lot of New Agey terms, I'm going to try not to, but embody real fear, then you have to reflect on Hashem's greatness.
Correct.
Right? And then if you really want to connect to love, you have to recognize Hashem's closeness.
Okay, that's true, which she discussed a little bit in chapter 3 and is going to come up in later chapters. But I thought you were going to say something else, which is the higher level of fear, which is to be in awe and reverence of God's presence. You have to truly think about God's greatness. In the lower level of fear, where you're just not transgressing what the king asked, all you have to know is that God's in charge, and he said, you don't have to know anything else. God's in charge, he said to do this. So I'm respecting that rule. If I want to get to a level of fear where I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm in the presence of Hashem, I'm trembling, you have to actually know Hashem's presence and know the greatness.
Yeah.
Right? So it requires a much deeper understanding and feeling towards Hashem's presence, and not just Hashem's in charge, do what he said. Okay, again, much more on this in chapter 41 and 42, 43. Okay, so let's conclude with these next few lines, before, and we'll get to part 2, I guess, next week. Part 2 of this chapter. Okay, so let's read it again inside, from the period. The line begins with the word malche, and then after the period of the third word. Or yida pnimis misu, a deeper, more internal fear. Shemis boishes begud losai. He is embarrassed, he's ashamed by the very presence of God's grandness. Lamres enik vaidai, to betray God's glory. Velasas araba enov, and do anything that's God doesn't like. Call toivas Hashem, anything that God despises, asher sani, which he hates. Haim, which they are, these things that God despises, haklippus v'sitra acher, is anything that isn't godly. Never mind sin. Anything that isn't godly, he doesn't want to go anywhere near, because he's in God's presence. Why would he want to do anything that's outside of God's desire, or even outside of God's absolute oneness? Asher yunikasam, which the way in which these klippas even get sustained, ma'adam atachton, is from the person below, this human being. And when he engages with them, who bishin samachem betzasloisase, is the 365 negative commandments. When the Jew does a negative commandment, he is drawing upon the energy Hashem invested in him and giving it to the place that's negative. Hashem invests energy in me, and when I do a sin, what I'm taking that energy Hashem gave me and investing it in klipa. So I'm standing in the presence of God, and what am I going to do? Take God's energy. I'm standing in His presence, and take that energy and use it to something that Hashem despises? I don't want to do that.
What's energy here?
Life. Hashem gives me life. He makes my arm move. Right? He gave me a neshama that allows my arm to move. And then I use my moving arm to do something Hashem doesn't want. So literally I took the energy that's in my arm that Hashem gave me and using it, and now something negative, klipa, which Hashem despises, is being sustained by me from the energy He gave me while I'm standing in His presence. That's much deeper than don't do what He asked you not to do. It's much deeper. Understanding Hashem's presence, understanding Hashem's investment in me, feeling that presence, and having this inherent repulsion to do anything that's not perfectly in line with Hashem's investment in me. Okay. So this ends part 1 of chapter 4. Part 2 we'll get to, God willing, next week. And part 1 essentially describes Torah and mitzvahs as they are from the vantage point of the godly soul. Right? The godly soul is a part of Hashem Himself, as we established in chapter 2, made up of a mind that understands God and a heart that feels for God, chapter 3. And then that mind that understands God and that feelings that feel for Hashem are invested and clothed in 3 garments of thought, speech, and action that help the godly soul express its either love for Hashem, its understanding of Hashem through Torah, its love of Hashem through mitzvahs, and its fear and reverence of Hashem on these 2 levels by staying away from that which Hashem doesn't wants us to stay away from. Part 2, God willing, next week, is going to be the mitzvah, not from the vantage point of the soul, but from the vantage point of Hashem himself. And when we think about the mitzvah from the vantage point of Hashem, it takes on a whole other meaning. And that's, we're going to get to what you're talking about, which is irrespective of what the godly soul is feeling, or not feeling, this is Hashem's mitzvah. That's going to come in part 2. But that comes from the perspective of Hashem. This is my commandment. Wherever you're standing is irrelevant, it's my commandment. But the first half, which is describing the godly soul's reality, describes it the way the godly soul would like to experience it if it was unobstructed by an animal soul. And these are still going to remain the tools of the godly soul. Even when it's obstructed, we're still going to use these tools as we navigate our godly soul, animal soul struggle. Okay. So a wonderful week, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
So much.
And God willing, continue next week.
Yeah, thank you.
This is